Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Craig Stover, the Executive Director of Allens Lane Art Center, and welcome to another episode of ArtShow. Today I have with me Ron Tarver. Thank you, Ron, for coming. Oh, Ron Tarver. Gerald Cyrus. So many photographers lately. Thank you, Gerald. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Before I begin, I just have a few opening statements that I need to make. First is about COVID. At Allens Lane, we take COVID very seriously. So we have a lot of things in place, open windows, we have fans on us, we have air circulated, we are socially distanced more than 6 feet, hence without the masks. So we try very much to make sure that our guests are safe here. I also want to let everybody know that Gerald and I will be talking, and at the end of our conversation, we're going to be taking questions from everybody. So you'll have to bear with us. I don't have my production assistant with me tonight. And also, lastly, I want to thank all of our donors, people who have made donations to Allens Lane Art Center. We can't thank you enough, especially in these really tough times. It really makes a difference. So thank you to all the donors and supporters. So welcome, Gerald.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming this evening. Really appreciate it. I was excited to have this conversation because we had an exhibit of yours here, we think, what, 2016?
Yeah, or maybe 2014, I'm thinking.
2014, okay.
Right.
It all blends together.
I know, time flies so
I love that
fast.
exhibition. I loved mounting it. I loved looking at the works, talking about it. It was fantastic.
Thank you. I was glad to show that body of work.
So I'm hoping to get some questions in that, to answers that even I don't know yet. So,
okay.
But let me start where I like to always start, which is, how did your life in the arts begin?
Well, it's funny. Before I actually started doing any kind of art or photography myself, I sort of grew up in a family or community where there were a lot of artists. So my older sister is an artist, and all of her friends, you know, that used to congregate around the house were artists as well. And so I was sort of around it and sort of absorbed a lot of it before I really had any ideas about myself doing it. But I actually started doing photography when I got a camera as a gift for Christmas.
How old were you?
I was about 27.
Okay.
Yeah, so well into adulthood by that time. And I decided, I think I had a camera before when I was in college and fooled around with it a little bit, you know, took my film down to the drugstore and had it developed. And then that camera got stolen and never got back into it. So this time when I got the camera, I decided I wanted to actually learn something about the craft of photography. And so I took a night course at a high school first, and then ended up taking an extension course at UCLA out in LA, where I'm from. And that got me started. I learned how to develop my own film, make my own prints, soon bought my own developer and my own, enlarger, and converted the bathroom into a makeshift dark room. Yeah. So that's where I started. That was about 1984. Okay. Yeah.
Did the light bulb come on around then that, hey, this is something I could do for a living, or I could do as, you know, for the rest of my life?
Maybe vaguely, but I didn't have any concrete ideas about that at the time. I just was pleased that I found something that I enjoyed doing, and I could do it on my own. I didn't need anybody's help. I could go out and make an image, make a photograph, and come back in and produce a print, all through my own endeavor. So I was just thrilled about that, you know, because it's kind of a point in my life where I knew I didn't want to continue doing the profession which I was in, which was accounting, but I didn't have really real ideas about what I was interested in. So that came as an enormous thrill to me to find something that I really enjoyed. And I happened to come across a community of photographers in LA. One place was a photography center run by the city where you could go and rent in a larger to make prints. And through that, I learned about a gallery that was actually in the neighborhood I grew up in. It's called Black Gallery, and it was a community of African-American photographers. and who were exhibiting and doing workshops and what have you.
Is this in the late 80s?
Yeah, this was like, yeah, from 84 through 89 when I was there. Yeah. So that was a tremendous influence on me in terms of, again, helping me improve my craft, learning about, you know, the aesthetics of art, how to, you know, put your work together, mat it and frame it and put it on a wall.
Right.
So all those things were enormously influential for me. And, you know, that really kind of got me started.
So how did you end up in Philadelphia?
It's a long roundabout way. So I first ended up in New York because at a certain point I decided that I wanted to pursue perhaps working as a photographer, and decided I needed additional formal education. So I decided to pursue an MFA, moved to New York to attend the School of Visual Arts. So I was there from 90 through 92, you know, when I got my MFA. And then stayed there in New York for another 8 years. Met my future wife and got married. And so we decided at some point that we wanted to move somewhere where we had a little more space, a little more livable perhaps, but still be close enough to New York. She's a New Yorker by birth, so of course she wanted to be close to there as well.
Does she still consider herself a New Yorker?
Less and less.
We're working on her.
Yeah. Yeah, so we wanted to be close enough to get there when we wanted to, but still be outside of the sort of the madness that is New York sometimes. So we moved here in 2000.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Philadelphia is all the richer for it.
Yeah, thank you.
So what is it about photography itself? I mean, nowadays artists have such a wide ability for so many different disciplines. What was it about photography that really drew you?
Probably the immediacy of it, and also the fact that it has this sort of duality of this really close reflection of life, but at the same time being different, right? And so I like that the fact that it had this close connection to real life, right? And so, and once I started investigating and looking at the work of other photographers, really masterful photographers, and saw the possibilities, that's when I really knew that that's the medium that I wanted to pursue.
Have you ever dabbled in other mediums?
Only as a student.
Really?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So in high school, I had an art class.
So you found your niche, and you're. I mean, you could explore it for the rest of your life, obviously.
Yeah.
But this is what.
Yeah, I didn't really think I had a talent for all the other mediums that I practiced, but somehow I took to photography really quickly.
Have you ever explored other types of photography? Pinholes, non-silver, anything like that?
Different formats. So I started off with 35 millimeter film, worked my way up to medium format, and even started practicing with 4x5 film. For a couple of the series that I did.
So this really leads me to my next question, because I want to talk about the equipment that you use. You know, we're at a really wonderful time where I get to talk to photographers that are both, you know, they all seem to start out it on film, and whether they've kept it or gone into digital, it's fascinating to hear those stories. So what equipment do you currently use?
It depends what I'm working on.
Really?
Oh, yeah. So if I'm, say, photographing my family and working in a tight environment and need to work quickly, I'm probably using a 35 millimeter camera, whether it's film or digital. When I'm going out in the streets, sometimes to photograph, it'll sometimes be medium format film, or like I said, when I started working in Camden, New Jersey, I started using larger format Polaroid film. So I had this large, old Crown Graphic camera, you know, this sort of like press camera, and started using that. So again, it just sort of depends, you know, what particular project I'm working on.
So digital has not really...
I mean, the one major project that I've shot in digital, I mean, I've used digital to print certain things that I've done. But the one major series I've shot on digital was when I took a trip to Cuba in 2016.
Wonderful series.
Yeah. And really enjoyed it. I mean, I really liked the work that I got out of there.
Right.
But I'm still a film photographer.
You're still a film guy.
Yeah. The thing that always troubles me about digital is that it moves so fastly, it changes so fast, and things end up just happening that you're not aware of, and all of a sudden something has been updated. You're out of the loop, and so that kind of stuff frustrates me. So
well, it can't take a lifetime to just match their film itself, right?
Right.
So I totally
film
agree with
moves
you.
more slowly. I think I'm more comfortable with that being my main medium.
Do you develop your own?
Yes, still.
You do?
Yes.
Fantastic.
I'm able to have a studio where I can have a dark room, and
so here's the big question: do you print your own?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Still.
So do you always print your own?
If it's film based.
Okay.
Yeah, if it's film based, pretty much, unless for some for some exhibits I've been in, they really large print.
Right.
So that I had printed by someone else. But if it's say up to 16 by 20 inches, I do that all by myself.
So I assume you have a dark room.
Yes.
And your home, or do you have a separate studio?
I have a separate studio. Right.
That's nice.
Yeah. The benefits of Philadelphia.
Right, exactly.
Benefits of
So where
Philadelphia.
is your studio then?
It's in West Philly.
Okay.
Yeah. It's in West
Have you had that one for a long time, or?
Since about 2005.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is a row home.
And you like having it separate than your house?
Yeah, definitely. I don't have the distractions there that I have at home, so I don't even have internet there.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah, no.
Is it can and string, or is it?
I'm still accessible by phone, but
do you invite people to? Can people come to your studio? Do you ever invite them to come over, or is it a sacred space?
Yeah, it's a very junky space, so I really tend not to invite people over there. I mean, if I have someone come over to look at prints, I'll typically do that at my house, where it's a little more orderly. Why people in a more orderly condition in the studio. But yeah, it's great to be able to go somewhere where I can just concentrate on printing, or whatever I'm doing. If it's happened to be organizing prints or framing and matting things.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating. You're not shooting in digital, but you do digitize.
Oh yeah. Of course.
Stuff,
Now,
right?
just to make your work accessible to people, you have to digitize.
Yeah.
You have to scan it in some way or fashion, and get it uploaded to a website or be able to send to people.
Right. So I want to just dive in a little bit more about you printing your works. Do you edition your works, or are they one-offs, artist proofs? What do you consider?
I just recently have started editioning pieces. Yeah.
Small batch, I assume?
Up to about 15.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Do you edition in different sizes as well? Do you find a benefit to that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I never did before because, you always have this thought, well, suppose there's this one print and, 60 people want to buy it. Well, at this point in my life, I realize that's
right.
So I'm better off just.
You've seen the light.
Yeah, I've seen the light.
Right. Yeah. Well, the rarity, and you do sign your works.
Yes.
Usually on the back.
On the back.
Yeah, that's what a lot of artists are now.
Yeah.
Starting to do.
But I'm at this point now. I mean, I've been involved in photography for so long, I now have what they call vintage prints.
Okay.
So prints that are 30, 35 years old.
Wow. Vintage. Huh?
Yeah, right. So, that's the benefit of being in it for so long.
Well, one of the things I think, again, because we live in an interesting time, getting your images out there, it's not just the actual image. You have not only your website, which we encourage everybody to go visit, there's social medias, and most importantly, there's publishing now that's easily acceptable. So you have a wonderful book that you made from your time in New York and Manhattan?
Right. When I was living in Harlem.
Right.
And I was going to all these little bars and lounges where they have live jazz.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been a fan of jazz since I was a teenager. So I've been going out to clubs since I was old enough to go to clubs. And I actually started photographing musicians in LA when I was living there. But I would just photograph the stage, and that was it. And then when I moved to New York and I moved to Harlem and I started discovering all these little, bars and lounges where they have live jazz and they have jam sessions on Monday nights, I discovered that this scene around the stage was just as fascinating with what was happening on stage. And so you had all these musicians who were usually in the stage, usually in the audience, watching, and they would come up and sit in for, a song or two. There would be dancing, which is something I hadn't seen in the clubs that you'd go to downtown. So there was this whole other kind of activity or scene going on. And I decided, I definitely need to photograph that. And so I started taking my camera, got to know the musicians and the promoters. They told me about other places to go. And so, after a while, after about 6, 7 years, I had this enormous body of work. So
what made you publish?
Well, I had the opportunity to show it.
Okay.
Yes, because I tried finding publishers for it in the late 90s and wasn't being successful at it.
Right.
And then I moved to Philadelphia and got involved with doing other things like the Camden work, the Brazil work. But then I was given the opportunity to exhibit the work at Leica Gallery in New York City. And I said, okay, well, this is the opportunity I'm gonna take to get this work published. And if I have to do it myself, I'm gonna do it myself.
Right. And so Stormy Monday?
Stormy Monday, yes.
Where's the title come from?
That's a song that was popularized by, blank on the name.
We'll edit that in later.
Right, okay. It was a popular blues song called Stormy Monday. And because so many of these jam sessions were held on Monday nights, I thought that was an appropriate title.
That's great. It's a great book, and it's available on your website.
Yes,
right? So people can contact you with that.
Yeah.
So to me, it appears that you work in series.
Yes.
And so tell me a little bit about the ideas for these when they come up. Like, is it a natural progression that you just do you start working and then realize the series?
Generally, yeah. Generally, yeah. If I try to plan out or pre-think something, it generally kind of falls flat.
Okay.
It's usually when I stumble upon something and then go back and photograph it again and again, that's usually when I realize I have the potential for a series.
So you did the series in New York, and then there was another series in Brazil.
Right.
So did you know that you were going to do a series there, or did you just get a trip and it happened to?
Yeah, I was invited to a residency called Sacatar, Sacatar Foundation in Bahia, Brazil. They offer 8-week residencies. And I was lucky enough to be one of the first groups that were invited down in 2002. And so I had some familiarity with Bahia and its importance in the African diaspora, in terms of it being the largest city, the city with the largest African descended population in Brazil. And so I was a little familiar with the music that came out of there. So I knew I had some idea that I, wanted to photograph. And because I had been photographing in the streets of Camden with Polaroid, I thought, I'd love to try to take this technique, this methodology down to Brazil, and see if I could,
So talk me through, I'd be curious, like on a day when you're out shooting, is it like you stumble upon, or do you set it up, or do you come back?
No, it's strictly wandering. Once in a while, I'll come back to something if it's if I see there's a potential for something and it's not quite right at that time. But I'd say 90% of the time, it's just stumbling. It's just walking around, because something at one particular time of the day, or even just that day, might be special. And you come back another day and there's nothing. It's gone. Right. So it's just wandering around. It's meeting people.
So when you're shooting something like that, so you're out for the day, and you're shooting, do you do a lot of, I guess the best word is bracketing? Do you just like shoot like a machine gun and find out what you get, or can you tell when you got something special?
Again, you sometimes can tell But I've had a number, and this is the weird thing about photography, particularly if you're shooting with a rapid process or, you know, kind of methodology like 35 millimeter where you can take pictures very rapidly. You can often get in a zone where you're just reacting, you're not even thinking. And there'll be images I'll see come up on the contact sheet and I can't remember taking them. I was like, wow, I took that. Which is really
a whole
wonderful.
Book in that.
Yeah.
Pictures I took, I didn't know.
Right. Which is really wonderful because your subconscious is taking over and it's taking you places that you know, maybe even your consciousness would interfere with. And if you thought about it too much. So that's a really wonderful thing. Now, when you're working with Polaroid or 4x5, it's a much slower process. So it's not going to occur in that sense. But yeah, a lot of times you know there's something special. You know there was something special that occurred between you and the subject, and you just hope it comes out on film. Yeah,
the lightning in a bottle.
Yes, exactly.
That's the saying. Happy accidents.
Right.
Also
exactly.
come into play.
Yeah. Well, particularly with the way I work, happy accidents are all the time. Yeah.
So I also saw you were working when I first met you. You had started work in Camden.
Right.
Why Camden?
Again, stumbled upon it.
Okay.
Yeah, I had just driven across on my way to somewhere else, I think a movie theater or something. And it just struck me, the waterfront was so developed, you know, the aquarium, and they had just built a minor league baseball stadium, and I think they had the concert center. But as soon as you got outside that area, everything looks just completely run down, right? And this was back in 2002. So I was like, wow, what's going on here? How come? And I don't think I'd ever seen such a stark dichotomy in a city so small. So I thought, well, okay, well, it would be interesting to come back and investigate this some more. And a couple of more trips back and just run into people and talking with them kind of gave me the idea that, okay, there's something here I need to check out. So it started off pretty much just photographing, making streetscapes, looking at the actual built environment. And then as I started meeting people, it turned more into street portraiture. Yeah.
So I was fascinating, you know, we were talking before tonight started. Obviously the pandemic has put a big kibosh on, you know, getting out there as much as a lot of artists, you know, who do the type of work that you do. But I was fascinated to hear that you said you're still working in Camden or still thinking about it.
Yeah, I went back in 2019. I definitely went back several times.
Okay.
Because I sort of wanted to, well, Camden's changed. So, I mean, there's been more development, you know, a lot has taken place since when I started photographing there. And as I, you know, went back over there and started driving around, I started noticing new developments. And so I sort of wanted to maybe put a capper on this or coda and see, okay, how's Camden changed? Right. What's still the same? And see if I can maybe finish up that body of work.
I'd be curious to, you know, if you go back, are people like, hey, I remember you?
Yeah, well, I've been fascinated. I mean, if I could find some of the people that I photographed in the early 2000s, it would be incredible because a lot of them were kids at the time, right? Or teenagers. So it really would be fascinating if I could find out, you know, what they've done, where they've gone.
I'd love to see
that actually happened in Brazil because I've gone back to Sacatar twice since my initial time there. And the last time in 2011, I was actually able to find some of the people that I had photographed in 2002. And particularly, again, the kids. It's just, you know, incredible.
I can imagine.
The difference, yeah.
That's great. So we are going to take some questions in a little bit, but before we do that, I want to ask, what did you bring me today?
Okay, well, this is one of my pieces from the 1990s when I was photographing my family. So we talked about series, but this is maybe my first major series. It's called Kinship. And I started this when I was pursuing my MFA at the School of Visual Arts. It was actually my MFA thesis. And I started going down to New Orleans a lot and photographing my relatives down there. Both of my parents from New Orleans. I grew up in LA but most of my relatives, aunts, uncles, cousins have remained in New Orleans. And I made, I think, 2 trips there prior to the 1990s. But I decided I needed to go back.
Okay.
I needed to go down, and I needed to find out more about not just my family, but that culture, because New Orleans is one of the most unique cultures in the world.
Oh, yeah.
But I didn't know a whole lot about it myself, you know, other than the food, which my mom continued to cook. But other than that, I didn't know a whole lot about it myself. And so
what am I seeing here? What is
this? Is from my grandfather's funeral.
Okay.
So my grandfather died. I found out about it on my way out to LA, and rerouted my trip to go through New Orleans for a few days so I could attend the funeral. And these are 2 of my cousins, Julian and Randy, who are there as pallbearers. And one of the things I like about the image is that you can see so much about New Orleans in the sense of that's just a cemetery, right? Like all the crypts are above ground because, as we know from Katrina, New Orleans sits below sea level. So all the crypts are built above ground. And it's one of those neighborhood cemeteries, right? New Orleans is a place where, you know, every neighborhood might have a little 2-block square cemetery, right, plot in there. So you can see some of the houses in the background. And then you have my 2 cousins, you know, and their gestures say a lot about their personalities.
Well, that's, you know, one of the things I'm attracted to your work about is the storyline in your work. Even when you do a simple portrait, they take me through stories, and I really enjoy that. So there's both emotion and, you know, just, you can tell that it's a funeral even without the cemetery in it. I really like that. But I'm also really struck about the geometry of it. You know, this beautiful shape over here, and the contrast in them. It's an exquisite photograph.
Thank you very much.
For those people at home, I'm going to ask that if this is not up online somewhere.
Oh, it is.
Okay. Is it on your website?
Yes.
Or is it on? Okay.
Yeah.
And your website is?
GeraldCyrus.com.
So I do expect you all to flock to his website.
Right.
To
And
see
this series again is called Kinship. So it's right there underneath that portfolio of work. Yeah, and then just the like you mentioned, the door of the hearse open, you know, so that sort of enigmatic element I like. And then the white gloves, right, which they're wearing because they're pallbearers. But then that also, for me, sort of brings back the whole idea of things like minstrel shows, which are, you know, part of the African American culture.
The black jacket there, that it so sets off the gloves and the little carnation there.
Yeah. So that sort of takes me back to this idea of like certain things like something that could be considered stereotypical depiction of African Americans, like a minstrel show, but at the same time, this beauty of a ritual, right, that is taking place.
That's the storyline that I'm so attracted to. You know, work like this is the kind of work that I think I could look at for years and still see new things pop into it. I think that's the magic that not all artists are capable of doing. So I really, this
is again, so it's one of the things like early on where I kind of feel like I was nailing something. I was getting to something deeper than I was before. So
crazy question. Do you ever shoot in color?
All the time. I just haven't exhibited. Okay, all right. I haven't exhibited anything in color. I've had a few images published in color as part of a group, and this is a great opportunity for me to mention this group I'm a part of called Kamwenge.
Okay.
It's a group of historic group of African American photographers that started in the early '60s and has carried forth since then. And they actually have a show. The early members of the group have a show opening at the Whitney Museum this weekend.
Oh, wonderful! So
everyone, if they can get up there to see that, they can check that out. But yeah, they had a book that was published a couple of years ago, and a few of my color pieces were published in that. Yeah, so I'm shooting all either digitally or even before on film, I was shooting in color. But I just haven't felt deeply enough about any particular thing I've shot.
Do you shoot in color and then wipe it out just to convert it into black and white? Do you ever do that?
Well, in digital.
Okay.
Yeah, in digital, right. It's you can shoot in color and then convert, which is another thing which is kind of problematic for me with digital.
A whole nother
yeah, because I like to see it in black and white from the beginning. So it's really hard sort of mentally for me to see something in color and then so
I'd be curious from when you were first starting to photograph, so say when you were out in LA to now, is it the same processes for you? Is it the same feelings, or is there a difference between when you first started to now?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a difference. I mean, a lot of my methodology is the same in the sense of just getting out and walking around and wandering around.
Right.
Maybe it's a little different in the sense that having a maybe better idea what I'm looking for. Maybe a little better comfort level in terms of dealing with people. And just having, hopefully a better sense of aesthetics. But a lot of it is just the same. It's just that process of getting out there, taking your camera, getting out there and walking around. Or like again, with this case with my family, this is a little different for me in the sense that I was photographing people a lot indoors, and which necessitated me learning some different techniques. One, learning how to use a wide angle lens, which I hadn't been doing before. And then also how to utilize flash, right? Because in order to photograph indoors and get enough light in there that I could use a fast enough shutter speed and freeze some of the action, I needed to know how to use a flash. So that necessitated that. But then once I learned those things, and then you take some of those ideas back out on the street. So in terms of working with a wide angle lens with this is,
So when people look at your work and, that obviously people talk to you about the work at exhibits and whatnot, their reactions to your work, is it what you expect that, or are you surprised by people's reactions?
Yeah, I'm often surprised, because people will always see a connection to their own personal lives in a lot of images. So I've heard people all the time tell me that there's an image I have of, it's just a woman holding a cigarette. It's one of the Stormy Monday images, but it's just an image of her, basically her arm, her elbow, and her hand holding the cigarette. And so many people have told me that that's so reminiscent of like an older aunt, who the way she held the cigarette.
Mannerisms.
Yes, mannerisms, yeah. And these things that people tell me about the images that resonate with their upbringing, and their family life.
That's great. Well, again, I'm going to encourage everybody to go to Gerald's website. I always encourage people to not only go to the website, but poke around and ask questions. That's what the great part of technology is. A lot of people are always afraid to do that. You can't get a studio visit out of you, right? but you can ask questions. So, and are you on social media as well?
No, not anymore.
No, it's mostly just the Facebook and sort of things.
Yeah, well, not even Facebook. I'm not even Facebook.
Or I'm sorry, your website.
Just the website. Yep,
that's great.
Yep.
So I'd like to go to a few questions if anybody has questions. Let me see if I can unmute some people here. Actually, the easiest way to do this is if you have any questions, there is a chat feature that's going to be easier than just opening it up. There's a little chat button. It's either at the bottom or the top of your screen. Just click on that and type in your question to the host. And so we'll take a few questions. The first question comes from Ron. Speaking of Ron.
Hey, Ron.
Ron, you're on my mind apparently tonight. How do you choose the format in which you make images? Would you consider using 4x5 to make portraits? Conversely, would you use 35mm to make landscapes?
Yeah, it was funny. When I started out, everything was on 35mm because that's the only camera that I owned. So yeah, I just did it. And then as I learned more and, decided to branch out more and step up in these different formats. Yeah, so definitely, yeah, 4x5. A lot of the street portraits that I made in Camden, not Brazil, it was a little smaller format. It was like a 3x4 Polaroid format. But a lot of street portraits I made in Camden were with a 4x5 camera. So definitely I'm interested in using 4x5.
Do you bring multiple cameras with you? Do you ever do that?
Yeah, actually, yeah. When I was walking around in Camden, I would always carry around a little 35 millimeter just in case.
Okay, right, yeah.
Polaroid is notorious for failing so just sometimes just to make sure you got something out of the situation, I would make sure I had a 35 millimeter camera on me. But yeah, a lot of it was, carrying around the tripod. That's another thing you don't think about. Lugging around a tripod so that you could take these 4x5 images is a whole nother endeavor than just
sounds to me like you need an intern.
Yeah, I've often
just follow
said
you
that
around.
quite a bit. Yes.
Do what you need to do.
Yep.
Another question, new question from Joan. How do you select your work to share out of so many images that you have?
Well, yeah, editing, like we hadn't talked about editing.
Yeah.
Editing is a huge part of photography.
Oh, yeah.
Because you just shoot a lot more than you're ever going to print or even exhibit. So the editing is a huge part of just the nature of photography.
You spend whole days just editing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I can spend a whole day.
Whole weeks.
I can spend days editing, because I tend to do things in batches. So I'll develop a whole lot of film at once and do all the contact sheets, and then set aside some time to go through them and edit them and select the images. And then you print the work, right? But not everything you print's not going to be exhibited either. So then you edit from the stuff you print, you edit down to the best prints. And those get exhibited and perhaps published or shown. All right, so it's a constant whittling down process.
A lot of waste.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, definitely. That's the one good thing about digital. It saves space.
Saves space.
It saves space, yeah.
Yeah, but then you don't need the studio. So you need the studio to get out of the house.
Yes.
So it's a vicious circle, I think. So we still have time for a couple more questions if anybody else has any. In the meantime, I do have another question for you. Curious to know, do you look at other artists' works?
Oh yeah, all the time.
So what do you, like who's your go-to artists or who are you looking at currently that you can't get enough of?
Oh boy. I usually am going back to the ones that were influential to begin with. Yeah. So the first major influence I can say was Roy de Carava.
Okay.
Who was a legendary New York photographer. Did this legendary book called The Sweet Flypaper of Life in conjunction with Langston Hughes. So that, again, we talk about all these fortuitous things, how I came across this gallery in my neighborhood, When I started learning about photography, I saw this documentary film on Roy de Carava at this film festival.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if that's on YouTube.
It might be.
Yeah, that sounds like something I gotta see.
Maybe Conversations with Roy de Carava.
Okay.
The filmmaker is Carol Parrott Blue.
Okay.
And this was again 1984. So I saw this film, and all of a sudden I had a whole concept about photography I didn't have before.
Yeah.
And so that was definitely a major influence on me. And Cartier-Bresson, the great French photographer, certainly. When I started looking at more documentary photography when I moved to New York, someone like Danny Lyon was a major influence to me. Joseph Kudelka, Czech photographer, right? And then other artists that I looked at, great artists like Romare Bearden, Charles White.
So when you go to, say, the museums, do you naturally gravitate to just the photography, or do you find yourself in sculpture?
I definitely try to take in a lot more than just photography.
Okay.
Definitely. Yeah, so all the permanent collections.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I love talking about other artists, because there's the connections are so wonderful to see.
Yeah, and that was the greatest thing about New York for me was that the museums and galleries were an education in and of itself.
Yeah.
Outside of the classes I took at SVA, just having access to all those museums and galleries was a whole other education. So I'm more than happy that I moved there, was able to.
So we have time for one more question. How do you, this is from DM, how do you start the different series?
Oh, so again, like I usually just stumble upon them, you know. Sometimes I'll start off with an idea and I'll think about, I want to check this out, or I want to do this. Like say one idea that I had, and then I haven't, again, sort of like hasn't been brought to completion, was I was thinking about getting back into street photography, a more kind of a spontaneous street photography than these portraits I was doing. But I was trying to think of a way to broaden the single moment. And so I started thinking about printing the images in triptychs. But rather than say, select these individual images off of different contact sheets or rolls of film, I decided I wanted to be the actual sequential images on a particular roll of film. So 3 images in a row that I had taken.
That sounds like an editing nightmare, though.
Yeah, right. Yes. So that was an idea I came up with before, and then went out and tried to execute it. And I actually got a lot of good things. Now that's something I actually have to print digitally, because in order to get the images large enough, they need to be printed digitally. So I have a lot of that work that needs to be printed. But again, most of my series I come across just through something I've already photographed a number of times and thought, okay, this looks like, this is some fertile ground.
Lightning in a bottle.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank, I could sit here and talk to you all night.
Same here.
I want to thank you for coming by today.
Thank you.
And I want to thank everybody out there for tuning in to ArtShow. We're going to take a break for Thanksgiving next week, but we hope that you can come back. We have plenty of other artists lined up. And again, make sure to go to Gerald's website, check out all the photos. Which series is this in?
This from Kinship.
Kinship, so you get a nice detail of this photograph from there, and ask him questions and buy his work. That's what we need. So I want to thank everybody, especially our donors again. Thank you very much for supporting Allen's Lane, and we'll see you again at another episode of Art Show. Have a good evening.